Alright, welcome to my first YouTube video. I literally made an account here just so I could speak my mind about the Attack on Titan ending, mostly because I'm sick of scrolling Reddit and having to type out my justifications for certain aspects of the ending over and over again. So, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about some of the gripes a lot of people had with it, and one of them is that Eren's agency was completely taken away. If you'll recall, a pretty large theme of this entire story is that everyone is a slave to something, and that runs completely counter to Eren's entire ideology that freedom must be pursued. He wants to be free. He yearns for freedom in every sense. He's all about freedom. People have even jokingly shipped Eren with the very idea of freedom. And that's what makes this so tragic, because by the end, you realize Eren is a slave. Once he acquired the Founder and once he kissed Historia's hand, that was it. Right when he did that, the past, the present, and the future all became the same thing to him. The only way, and I mean the only way that makes sense, is if everything is already completely set in stone and he has zero agency to change any of it. And I'm not completely making this up either, because they throw in a very deliberate line to give credence to what I'm saying. Eren says, "Armin, my thoughts have become incoherent. The influence that the Founder's powers bring about have no past or future. They all exist at the same time, and that's why it was inevitable." From our linear perspective of time, future Eren goes back to tell past Grisha that he needs to steal the Founding Titan and kill the royal family. But if we understand this quote from chapter 139, Grisha was always motivated by Eren, and this was already a fact of life by the time Eren does it. That this always was the case, and it always will be. This isn't something Eren can just decide for himself, which makes him a slave to the grand scheme, and that's the tragedy of this hero, if we can even call him a hero by the end of this story, because he destroyed 80% of the world. I think it's also really important to emphasize that Eren's experience is entirely unique through his combination of the Attack Titan and the Founding Titan. Grisha never had the advantage of holding both the Attack and the Founding Titan at the same time as continued exposure to royal family members like Eren did. No one else can see time the way he does, and arguably his perception of time is the true perception of time. While everyone else is forced to live it out in a linear fashion, Eren acquires the ability to see the entire picture as a stagnant thing, something that he has no control over, but can be aware more than anyone else. And you can see this frustration and apathy coming about because he not only has this awareness, but he has to live through these events in a linear fashion because he is also human. Anyways, in case it's not already obvious, I think it's fine that Eren's agency was severely overinterpreted in prior chapters. I think it's fine that he ended up being a slave to destiny, because I think that's just the irony for his character. I think it really sucks for him, and it sucks for the people who really idolized what he had become, but I do think the gray area is still there, and you can wonder why you thought Eren was so cool even though he was performing genocide. There is one gripe that I have to mostly give to the fandom, but I'm not gonna make all the concessions that you would expect me to, is just how perplexing it is that Mikasa had such a profound effect on Ymir. Like, I'll completely buy, just for the sake of discussion, I'll buy that Ymir had some twisted affection for the king, and that's why for 2,000 years she decided to bend to his will even after his own death, of just empowering the Eldians, giving them superpowers, and obeying the royal family. I think there's a bit of a false equivalency here comparing Eren to King Fritz and Mikasa to Ymir, because in my mind, Ymir's situation is definitely some form of Stockholm Syndrome, whereas with Eren, it's almost weird to think about because their actual origin story is that Eren freed Mikasa from being captured and abused. And usually you would define Stockholm Syndrome as being sympathetic towards your abuser or your captor. So I don't quite understand how this is supposed to be a parallel here, because Eren legitimately freed Mikasa from that fate when they were children. So I don't. That one's a little harder for me to swallow. Like, I can totally accept that Ymir had this twisted affection for her oppressor, but I don't see a concrete parallel here, and it's interesting, to put it lightly, that all Ymir needed was to see a very loose equivalency to her own relationship. And when I say loose, I mean loose. It's also a little weird that we don't get to see even one panel dedicated to the expiration of the Hallucegenia. I'm probably butchering that, but it's been a little while since I've taken biology. Again, I see these as peculiarities at most. I don't see them as story-destroying elements like I've seen some people claim. But moving on. Another gripe that I've seen that's far less frequent than the others, but I still wanted to touch on it briefly, is that Eren's final form is a bird. I don't think we're supposed to take this literally. I don't see how anyone possibly could, because this story has been teeming with bird imagery since the very beginning. The wings of freedom, all the bird scenes, the birds at the very beginning of the story that are flying over the wall, symbolizing the freedom to go wherever they want and not be trapped behind the walls. This is symbolism because a couple chapters ago, before the chapter 139 ending, Zeke describes death as a form of freedom, because now, like, once you die, you no longer have to struggle to reproduce. You don't have to struggle in any capacity. You're just free now. And of course, this is incredibly depressing, but this is Attack on Titan. I think the primary takeaway from this bird scene is just to let you know that Eren is, in a sense, finally free and can finally rest. Another common gripe is that the rumblings serve no purpose, and that nothing about the world is different now, and everything is just gonna rage on. The war will continue with the Jaegerists and the rest of the world. But I don't get this sense at all when I'm reading the chapter. Maybe I would have had that opinion when I was reading the very loosely translated version of this chapter, like the fan translations that were just rushed and scrapped together so that they could be the first ones to have an English version. I'm talking about like the more coherent translations that are available now, where it's very clear that Historia is just writing a letter to the Alliance describing Eren's ideology that either Eldia or the world needs to disappear for the fighting to stop. She simply says that he might be right. Even so, they have to try. And that's exactly what this ending is. They're getting ready for peace talks. The Alliance is meeting with the Jaegerists for peace talks, and it's entirely up in the air whether those peace talks will make any difference. But the fact that those talks are even taking place, and the fact that the Eldians no longer need Titans to even be a force in the world, there is undeniably a difference in the world today, and in this epilogue, as a direct result of the rumbling. And that's not to say the rumbling was good in any moral capacity. You just cannot deny that there are objective differences between the state of the world pre-rumbling and the state of the world in the epilogue. I think it's nonsense to say that it didn't accomplish a single thing. If you're looking at it from a utilitarian perspective, the world is worse off following the rumbling, but if you're solely looking at it from the perspective of the Eldians, they have benefited from this massacre, and that is something that everyone understood long ago before this ending ever came out. The last gripe I want to cover is by far the most ridiculous in my mind, and it's that Eren's character was completely assassinated by his feelings for Mikasa in one of the final panels. I can't believe this is a real problem that people are having with this chapter. They gave this dude a single human moment in a private conversation with his oldest friend moments before his untimely death. A death that he knew for certain was coming, and a death that he welcomed because he knows he's a monster in this story. I don't understand how anyone can have this standard where a person on their deathbed can't complain about anything, can't have like a single hypocritical cry before they literally cease to exist and die. I think this mainly got under people's skin because for like a year now, I guess, a year running, people have been selling Eren as like this ultimate protagonist who is so powerful now, no one can beat him. People are upset that he lost. But again, this is something that was always going to happen. He knew he was going to lose. He had all of this information ahead of time. And even when back when he was in denial and was screaming at Hanji because she had no ideas to fix things, as he watched it all take shape, the life just kind of got sucked out of him. And for a brief moment, brief moment, he cries to his oldest friend, and people lose their minds. Like, Eren no longer is a good character. He's the worst, and this show's the worst. That's the fandom that this poor bastard slaved over a story for 11 years for. It's not enough that Eren accomplished every single one of his goals. He got rid of the Titans, he evened the playing field for Eldians and the rest of the world. I know there's some disagreement here, but I think some people are overlooking the fact that not only is 80% a massive percentage, but we don't know how much of that remaining 20% is made up of Eldians and Alliance members who are both in talks for peace. So we have no real frame of reference of whether they're in a bad position or not, but I would argue that they're in a better position than ever. So you can interpret that again as a victory for Eren's premise of freeing and liberating the Eldians. Peace was also definitively impossible with the existence of the Titans because Eldians would always be feared if the Titans were around. That was a cold hard fact drilled into us by the story itself. The existence of the Titans separated the Eldians from the rest of humanity. That was their cross to bear, and they no longer have to bear it. And the future is completely open now, and that is a direct result of Eren's intervention from our perspective. Thank you for listening to my 2 cents here. I might make more videos in the future depending on how this one does. I'm just definitely sick of going on to Reddit and just seeing everyone regurgitating the same rhetoric. That Isayama's a clown, and that Eren's a clown, and that he's a bird, and that everything's dumb and nothing mattered, because, I mean, this was an 11-year journey that I enjoyed very much. This last chapter isn't nearly enough to ruin all of that for me, and I'm not even gonna act like it's that bad of an ending. So, that's my 2 cents. Thanks for sticking around. Garmble Darngan Darngle.